My name is Hazel Brennan, and I'm 37 years old. Yesterday morning, I woke up to 99 missed calls from my mother and my younger sister. The very same people who, not long before, had told me they needed space. That I was not to contact them again. That was the message they sent me. On my birthday, my sister even liked it. What they didn't know, what they had never once bothered to learn, was that I sign every check in this family. That the house they live in, the cars on their drive, the credit cards they tap without a second thought, all of it flows through my hands. Until I made it stop, before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story is genuinely speaking to you. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from and what time is it there? Drop it in the comments. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up, I was the invisible daughter, not in any dramatic, obvious way. There was no cruelty I could point to with certainty. No locked doors, no raised voices, nothing so clean as that. It was subtler than that, and subtlety, I've come to understand, has a way of doing far more damage than anything you can see. My mother simply looked past me. Every room I entered, her eyes would find my younger sister, Poppy, first. Every conversation found its way back to Poppy's feelings, Poppy's ambitions, Poppy's latest drama. I became the fixer, the quiet one who handled things, the one who didn't need anything because she'd long stopped asking. When our dad passed away 11 years ago, I was 26 and had only just finished my master's in finance at Leeds. The company, Brennan & Co., a mid-sized property development firm that Dad had spent his whole adult life building, was sinking. Badly. Mum didn't know where to begin. Poppy was 21 and more interested in her social life than in a single spreadsheet. So I stepped up. I restructured the debt, renegotiated supplier contracts, worked 60-hour weeks in a cramped office in Holbeck until Brennan & Co. wasn't just surviving. It was growing. Now I'm the finance director. On paper, that sounds impressive. In reality, it means I transfer £6,500 into Mum's account every month. Another £2,800 to Poppy. I cover the mortgage on the house they live in Harrogate, both their car payments, the holidays, the spa memberships, the emergency loans that were never repaid and never mentioned again. Not once, not a single time in 11 years, has anyone said thank you. The only calls I receive from Mum are when the money's late. 2 days behind last February because I was deep in negotiations on a commercial contract worth more than anything we'd ever signed. She didn't ask how I was. She asked why the transfer hadn't come through. "Your sister needs it for her trip," she said. Not hello, not how are you. Just, where is the money? I try to remember the last time someone in my family acknowledged my birthday without prompting. I was 13. Dad made me a Victoria sponge, slightly wonky, far too much jam, and wrote "Happy Birthday, my little director" on a piece of card in his loopy handwriting. He was grinning like it was the cleverest thing he'd ever written. That was 24 years ago. He's been gone for 11 of them. And every year since, the 23rd of March passes as quietly as a gray Tuesday in February. At least, that was what I assumed this year would bring. 3 weeks before my birthday, I discovered something that shouldn't have been possible. It was an accident. Poppy forwarded a message to a group chat. Except, and this is where something cold moved through me. We didn't have a group chat. Not one that included all 3 of us. Turns out there was another one. Mum and Poppy's private channel, the one without me. The forwarded message was brief. "Let's go over the shares before Saturday's meeting." Pops, wear something smart. I stared at my phone for a long time. Shares. What meeting? I scrolled through the screenshots Poppy had accidentally included. Dozens of messages I was never meant to see. "Mum, we should look at selling some of the company's stock." Poppy, "Hazel won't be happy about that." Mum, "Hazel doesn't need to know just yet. She's there to handle the admin side of things." Something tightened in my chest. Poppy, "She acts like she runs everything. It's exhausting, honestly." Mum, "Don't worry about her. She's always been difficult. No social intelligence, that's why she buries herself in figures all day." Poppy, "True, lol. Business strategy's not really her thing, is it?" Mum, "You're the one with the real instinct for it, sweetheart. Just like your gran." I set my phone face down on the kitchen worktop. My hands were trembling. For 11 years, I had rebuilt that company from the foundations, sacrificed weekends, relationships, any real version of a personal life. And to them, I was the difficult one who handled the admin. But it was the date of their secret meeting that cracked something open in me. The 23rd of March. My birthday. They were planning to discuss selling my father's company, the one he trusted me to protect. On my birthday, without inviting me, without appearing to remember why that date might carry any weight whatsoever. That was when I started paying proper attention. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table in Headingley with a notepad and 11 years of bank statements. Working through numbers I'd been processing on autopilot for so long I'd stopped really reading them. Monthly transfers to Mum, $6,100. And 32 months, $858,000. Monthly support for Poppy, £2,800. 132 months, £369,600. Mortgage payments, car leases, credit card settlements, emergency loans that never came back. Another £350,000 at the very least. In 11 years, I had given my family somewhere in the region of £1.6 million. In return, I couldn't recall Mum asking how I was. I couldn't recall Poppy ringing just to talk. The only communication that passed between us was transactional. Money in, silence back. I thought about Dad. The way he used to look at me across the dining table, like I was the only other person in the room who understood what he was trying to build. The late evenings we'd spend going over business plans in his home office while Mum watched telly and Poppy slept. His quiet pride when I graduated. "You're the only one I'd trust with this, Hazel," he said, 3 weeks before the cancer made any of it irrelevant. "The company, the family, you'll look after it all. I know you will." I had kept that promise. But somewhere in the keeping of it, looking after the family had curdled into funding their lives while they erased me from them. I picked up my phone and found a name I hadn't rung in years. Jeffrey Ashworth. Dad's solicitor and oldest friend. He sent a message every year on the anniversary of Dad's passing. Always brief, always warm, always slightly careful. I'd replied politely every time without ever wondering why he kept reaching out. Now, in the dark of my kitchen, I was starting to wonder. I made a decision. I wouldn't confront them. Not yet. Part of me wanted to ring Mum immediately, to demand an explanation, to ask how they could sit there plotting to sell Dad's company without me, to ask how my birthday had become a meeting date. But what good would it do? More denial. More "I didn't mean it that way, Hazel." More "you've always been too sensitive." No, I wanted to see the truth clearly. And the clearest view would come on the 23rd of March, the day they'd chosen for their secret meeting, the day they'd apparently decided had no other significance. I would wait, watch, see exactly who they were when they thought I wasn't looking. I rang Jeffrey. He answered on the second ring as though he'd been half expecting it. "Hazel." His voice was warm, measured. "It's been a while," I said. "I'm sorry I haven't. Don't apologize." He said it gently but firmly. "I've always understood." He paused. "Are you ringing about the letter?" I went very still. "What letter?" A silence stretched between us. "Your father left something for you," Jeffrey said slowly. "Instructions were to hand it over when you were ready. I've been waiting for this call for 11 years. My heart was hammering. Ready for what? He didn't say exactly. Only that you'd know when the time came and that I'd know too." Another pause. "I think you might be there now, Hazel. Am I wrong?" I thought about the private group chat, the screenshots, the meeting planned for my birthday. "No," I said quietly. "You're not wrong. I'll bring it to you. But not until you ask me to. This has to be your choice." I thanked him and set the phone down. My hands were still again, but the trembling had shifted into something different. Something that felt almost like being ready. The 23rd of March arrived like an ordinary Wednesday. I was up at 6, coffee on, laptop open. The Leeds skyline was pewter through the window, a low sky promising rain. 37 years old. I noted it to myself the way you note the weather, flatly, without ceremony. I waited until midday before picking up my phone. My thumb hovered over the family chat, the one I was nominally part of, the one nobody had posted in for weeks. I typed a single line, "Today's my birthday. Has anyone remembered?" I pressed send, turned the phone over on my desk, and tried to concentrate on work. A contract needed reviewing. Quarterly projections were due. The minutes moved like they were wading through something thick. An hour, 2, 3. At 4:20, my phone buzzed. Mum's name on the screen. My heart jumped, just for a second. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe she'd remembered after all. I opened the message. "We need some space from you. Please don't be in touch anymore." I read it 3 times. Then came the notification beneath it. Poppy had liked it. My sister had hearted the message telling me to disappear from their lives. On my birthday, I sat very still. The gray afternoon light shifted across the room. Somewhere outside, a bus rumbled past. Life continuing, entirely unbothered by the fact that my family had just told me, with 9 words and a heart emoji, that I was done. I don't know how long I sat there before muscle memory took over. I opened Instagram. Poppy's profile was public. She'd never added me, never offered, and I'd long since stopped caring. Her most recent story was a photograph of champagne flutes and a table arrangement in dusty rose and gold, soft fairy lights in the background. I zoomed in on the banner behind the flowers. "Happy birthday," it read. The timestamp showed it had been posted 40 minutes ago. My hands had stopped shaking entirely. They were perfectly steady. I scrolled through Poppy's stories with a calm that surprised me. The first was the front of the house in Harrogate. The house I covered £1,200 a month in mortgage payments on. Pink and white balloons framed the door. A man in a dark jacket was moving a Range Rover. The second was a short video of Mum fussing with a floral centerpiece. She was wearing her company pearls, the ones she saved for occasions where she needed to impress. The third made something cold settle in my stomach. It was a handwritten guest list in Mum's familiar slanted script. I recognized the names immediately. Dominic Farrell from Farrell & Partners, our largest development client. The Whitmore Group, who controlled half the commercial property in the region. Dr. Priya Shah from the investment advisory firm we'd been trying to bring on side for months. These were not family friends. These were my professional relationships. People I had spent years cultivating, meetings I had traveled to, contracts I had drafted. And they were inside my family's house, the house I paid for, at a party I hadn't been told about. The fourth story showed the cake. 3 tiers, fresh flowers pressed into the icing, and a name written in looping white frosting. Poppy. Poppy's birthday is the 15th of May. I checked the date on my phone. The 23rd of March. My birthday. Mum was throwing a birthday party for the wrong daughter on the right daughter's actual birthday using money from the right daughter's account, while simultaneously telling that daughter to stop making contact. And she'd invited every professional contact who mattered. I sat with that for a moment. I imagined the conversations happening in that room right now. "Where's the older one?" someone might ask, vaguely. "Oh, Hazel." Mum would wave a hand. "She's not really involved in things, always been a bit difficult. Bless her." No warmth about her. They had absolutely no idea. The person funding their champagne, their caterers, their oven-baked canapés was sitting alone in her flat, freshly told to stop making contact by her own family. Something settled in me then. Quiet and final and irreversible. A decision that didn't need words. I rang Jeffrey at precisely 5 o'clock. "Bring me the letter. I'll be at yours within the hour. No questions." No hesitation. While I waited, I did something I'd never truly done before. I opened the company's full legal and financial structure. Not the operational files I managed daily, but the ownership documents, the founding papers. Things I had signed years ago without sitting down and reading slowly. Dad had left me 60% of Brennan & Co. Mum received 20%, Poppy 20%. I had always known the rough shape of this. What I hadn't fully absorbed, what I had been processing at the level of abstract fact rather than lived reality, was what it meant. As majority shareholder and finance director, I held signing authority over everything, every contract, every major expenditure, every distribution from the company accounts, including the family trust, the trust that paid Mum's mortgage, that funded Poppy's lifestyle, that had been releasing money every month for a decade while I authorized it without question. I had always thought of it as Dad's money. Family money. Something I was obligated to manage on everyone's behalf. But legally, structurally, nothing moved without my signature. Joffrey arrived at 6:10. He looked older than I remembered. The lines around his eyes deeper, his hair entirely silver now. But his gaze was still sharp and careful. "Before you read it," he said, holding out a sealed envelope, "there's something you should understand." I waited. "Your father restructured everything in the final 6 months." He paused. "He knew your mother would gravitate toward Poppy. He saw it even then, as clearly as anything. Why didn't you say something sooner? He made me promise to wait until you came to me." Jeffrey's voice was steady. "He said you'd need to see it for yourself. That if anyone told you, you'd find a reason not to believe them." I looked at the envelope in my hands. My name in Dad's handwriting on the front. "For Hazel. When she's ready." I broke the seal. The paper was slightly yellowed at the edges. His handwriting filled both sides. The same neat, unhurried print he'd used for everything from shopping lists to site contracts. "My dear Hazel, if you're reading this, then what I was afraid would happen has happened. Patricia and Poppy have pushed you far enough that you've started asking the right questions. I'm sorry it's taken this long. I'm sorry I couldn't shield you from it better while I was there to try. I've watched the way your mother looks at you since you were very small, the way she measures you against Poppy, and always finds you somehow wanting. It breaks my heart because I know the truth. You are the strongest person in this family, the most capable and the most loyal. But strength isn't the same thing as being valued, and loyalty means nothing to people who can only see what you're willing to give. I'm leaving you the company because you're the only one who will protect it. But more importantly, I'm leaving you the means to protect yourself. The trust, the accounts, the signing authority. It's all in your hands for a reason. You don't owe your sacrifice to anyone. Not even family. If they've hurt you badly enough that you're holding this letter, they've shown you who they are. Believe what you've seen. Walking away is not betrayal, it's survival. Doing the right thing doesn't mean allowing people to consume you. Remember that. I love you more than I ever found the right words to say. And wherever I am so proud of the woman you've become. Your dad. I don't know when the tears started. They arrived quietly without drama. The kind that come when something vast and long-held finally releases, he had known. All those years ago, sitting in that office, writing this on yellow-edged paper, he had seen exactly what would happen and built me a door out of it, brick by careful brick, waiting for the day I'd need to use it. That day was today. If you've ever felt invisible to the people who were supposed to see you most clearly, I want you to know, I see you. If this story is touching something real, will you do me a small favor? Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had to draw a boundary with someone who should have loved you without conditions? I'd really like to know I'm not the only one. And if you're finding value in this, the subscribe button genuinely helps more people find stories like this one. Now, back to what came next. I folded Dad's letter and slid it into the inside pocket of my jacket. Then I looked at Jeffrey. What are my options? He walked me through it carefully. As majority shareholder and sole signatory on the trust, I could freeze all distributions immediately. I could restructure Mum and Poppy's access to company funds. I could, if I chose, remove that access entirely. He paused. But that's not what you're planning to do. It wasn't a question, no. I stood and walked to my wardrobe. I'm going to that party. Joffrey's eyebrows went up. Are you sure that's the right thing? They're telling people I don't exist. That I'm difficult. That I do filing. I pulled out my work blazer. Charcoal gray, sharp, the one I wore to board presentations. I want to hear what else they're saying. And I want to see who's been listening, Hazel. Jeffrey's voice was careful. There's something I should tell you. I was invited to tonight's gathering. Dominic Farrellsell asked me along to look over some partnership documents. I turned to look at him. They don't know you're my solicitor. A small, controlled smile. Your mother never concerned herself with the details of the legal structure. She doesn't know I answer to you. Something clicked cleanly into place. You'll be there. And Dominic Farrell will be there. Our biggest client, and neither of them has any idea about tonight's version of events. He will. I thought about it. Mum performing in that room. Poppy claiming credit for things she'd never touched. And in among the guests, two people who knew exactly who ran the company and who signed their contracts. I didn't need to make a scene. I was never going to make a scene. I just needed to walk through the door and let the truth arrange itself. I'll see you there, I told Jeffrey. I arrived at the house in Harrogate at 7:30. The man in the dark jacket took my car without a second glance. I walked the familiar path to the front door, past the climbing roses Mum had planted in spring, using what I now understood was money from my bonus. The front door was propped open. Music and laughter, and the smell of something expensive, drifted out into the cold March evening. I didn't go straight in. Instead, I circled round to the side of the house where the bifold doors to the sitting room were half open, the curtains barely parted. Enough. Mum was holding court in the center of the room. She had the kind of easy authority that comes from never having had to justify it. Several guests were arranged around her, leaning in. Dominic Farrell was among them. I recognized him immediately from our quarterly calls. I moved closer, staying in the shadow of the garden wall. My older daughter, Mum was saying, her hand moving in that familiar dismissive arc. Hazel's got some difficulties. Emotional, really. Very hard to be around. Something moved through me. Cold and clarifying. We had to step back for our own sake, she continued. It was heartbreaking, but some people simply aren't capable of sustaining relationships. A woman I didn't recognize murmured something sympathetic. That must be awful for you. It is. Mum touched the corner of her eye. Actually touched the corner of her eye. We have to protect ourselves, don't we? Dominic spoke. Doesn't she work for the company? Hazel? Mum gave a small, practiced laugh. Oh, Hazel does some background work. Paperwork, admin, that sort of thing. She gestured toward Poppy. This one is the real business mind in the family. Just like my mother was, Poppy beamed. I stayed in the dark for a moment longer, watching my mother lie to my biggest client about who runs the company my father built. Then I walked through the front door. The foyer was full. Clients, partners, contacts, faces I recognized from meetings in Manchester and Leeds in London. People who knew my name on a contract even if they'd never put a face to it. A few nodded politely as I passed. I moved toward the sitting room. The conversations around me softened, then stilled. I was wearing my work blazer, not a party dress. I looked as though I'd come straight from the office. Mum saw me first. The color left her face in an instant. Her champagne glass tilted at an angle that nearly spilled. For 3 full seconds, she simply stared, Hazel. Her voice came out thin and strange. What are you doing here? I stopped in the center of the room. Every head turned. I'm not contacting you, Mum. My voice was completely calm. I'm simply here for the birthday party. Poppy pushed through the crowd, her face a knot of confusion and something close to alarm. Your birthday isn't for another couple of months. No, Poppy. I looked at her steadily. My birthday is today, the 23rd of March. Yours is the 15th of May. Silence. Then whispers. Mum's expression cycled through itself. Confusion, then a terrible, dawning comprehension, then something very close to fear. That's not. You can't just. I told you we needed space, and I've respected that. No calls. No messages. I glanced around the room, but these are my professional contacts too. I thought I'd say hello. The whispers grew. I saw Dominic Farrell frowning, his gaze moving between me and my mother. Hold on. His voice cut through cleanly. He looked at Mum. Your daughter is Hazel Brennan, our finance director. Mum's mouth opened. Nothing came. The room went very quiet. Dominic stepped forward. Mrs. Brennan. His voice was measured, but there was an edge beneath it. You've just told me Hazel does paperwork and admin. He looked at me, then back at Mum. Hazel Brennan has signed every contract between Brennan & Co. and Farrell & Partners for the past 11 years. He paused. She personally saved the Riverside scheme last autumn when it was about 6 weeks from collapse. A ripple went through the room. I don't quite follow this. That was Dr. Priya Shah, from the far side of the room. Patricia, You told us your older daughter wasn't involved in the business. She manages the money. Poppy's voice pitched slightly too high. That's not the same as actually. That is literally the definition of finance director. Dominic cut her off without raising his voice. From near the drinks table, Jeffrey Weston stepped forward with the unhurried calm of a man who has managed large sums on behalf of difficult people for 40 years. "If I may," he said. Everyone turned. As legal counsel for Brennan & Co., I can confirm that Hazel Brennan holds 60% of the company's shares. She is the majority owner and holds sole signing authority on all significant financial instruments. He paused for a fraction of a second. Including the family trust. The silence that followed was the kind that has texture. Mum's face had gone the color of old ash. "What does that mean?" Poppy grabbed Mum's arm. "What does sole signing authority mean exactly?" I looked at my sister, then at my mother, then at the room full of people who now knew the precise shape of the truth. "It means nothing happens without me." The room erupted. I watched Mum's face transform, confusion becoming calculation, becoming something very like panic. She had built her entire identity around being the matriarch of Brennan & Co., the gracious figurehead of a property empire. Now, the people she'd been performing for knew exactly who had been holding the whole thing together, Hazel. Her voice shifted into something softer, suddenly pleading. "Sweetheart, this has all been a misunderstanding. Your message was perfectly clear. I kept you needed space. You said not to be in touch. I didn't mean it the way it." Poppy liked it. My sister flinched. "I just thought, what did you think, Poppy?" "Exactly?" Poppy's mouth opened and closed. Around us, the guests were managing a fairly unconvincing impression of people who weren't listening to every word. Mum tried a different approach. Her eyes filled. "It's been so overwhelming, darling. We weren't in the right place. We weren't thinking straight. You were thinking straight enough to throw Poppy a birthday party 5 weeks early." On my actual birthday, I gestured at the banner, at the cake, at everything that bore her name in this house I paid for. The gasps came from multiple directions. The cake. Mum looked around the room desperately. The caterers mixed up the scheduling. We had to. The banner says, "Happy birthday, Poppy." I kept my voice perfectly even. "The cake says Poppy." This was not a scheduling error. Dominic cleared his throat. "I think I'll head off." He caught my eye and gave a brief, firm nod. "Hazel, I'll ring your office tomorrow. We should talk properly." Others began making their excuses, the graceful British version of a swift exit, a check of the watch, a mention of a babysitter, a train to catch. I watched my mother's carefully maintained world disassemble itself in the warm light of her own sitting room. Then I turned toward the door. "Hazel." Mum reached for my arm. "You can't just leave. We need to talk about." I lifted her hand gently from my sleeve. "You asked for space," I said. "I'm giving you exactly that." I walked out without looking back. "Right. I want to ask you something honestly. If you were standing in that doorway at that exact moment, what would you do? Would you walk out like I did, or would you stay and say more? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know how you'd handle it. And if you're not subscribed yet, now might be a good time, because we're about to get to the part where their world starts falling apart. Here's what happened next. I drove back to Leeds in silence. No music, no radio, just the dark of the A61 and the orange wash of motorway lights over the bonnet. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt tired, and beneath the tiredness, something I hadn't touched in a very long time: peace. When I got home, I filled a glass of water and sat at my desk. I had work to do. First, I rang the bank. The family trust had a standard review clause allowing any signatory to request a temporary freeze pending evaluation. I exercised it. The account manager was professional and unhurried. "How long will the review take?" "As long as it needs to," I said. "Please process the hold immediately." Next, I sent Jeffrey a list of action items by email. Review all financial access for Patricia and Poppy Brennan. Audit all distributions from the trust over the past 12 months. Prepare documentation for a formal restructuring of trust disbursements. Nothing illegal. Nothing designed to hurt. Just boundaries formally drawn. Finally, I opened my phone settings. Found Mum's contact. Pressed block. Then Poppy's. Then the group chat they'd included me in, the one where nobody had posted in weeks. They had asked me not to contact them. I was making certain I couldn't. I set the phone on the nightstand and lay down. For the first time in what felt like years, I didn't check my emails before closing my eyes. I didn't lie awake wondering whether someone needed something from me. The ceiling was dark and still. My flat was quiet. I thought about Dad's letter. Walking away isn't betrayal, it's survival. I wasn't walking away from my family. I was walking away from the version of myself that had quietly allowed people to treat me like a cash machine with a conscience. That night, for the first time in 11 years, I slept straight through until morning. No buzzing phone. No emergency. No one needing anything at 2:30. Just silence unbroken. I woke at 7 to thin March sunlight and the sound of pigeons on the window ledge. For a long moment I lay absolutely still. No tightness in my chest. No low hum of dread. My body had forgotten what it felt like to wake up without bracing for something. Then I remembered my phone was blocked. I unblocked the numbers just to look. 99 missed calls. The display had maxed out and stopped counting. 43 voicemails. I scrolled through the call log. Mum's mobile. Poppy's mobile. Numbers I didn't recognize. Presumably borrowed phones when they found themselves blocked. The voicemails had an arc of their own. 8:51 p.m. Hazel, this is absolutely ridiculous. Ring me back immediately. Mum's voice clipped and furious 10:08 p.m. My card's not working. What have you done? Poppy shrill 11:42 p.m. Hazel. Whatever point you think you're making, you've made it. Now sort this out. Mum again, less certain 2:17 a.m. Please, just call us back. We need to talk. Poppy crying now, 6:22 a.m. Hazel, the bank says the trust is frozen. They won't explain anything to us. Please, sweetheart. Mum's voice cracking, please. I set the phone down. My inbox held the same. An all-caps message from Poppy. You can't do this. This is family money. A longer, more composed email from Mum that swung between accusations and appeals without landing on either. I don't understand why you're punishing us. We love you. This is cruel. Please just ring. At the bottom of the inbox, a different name. Dominic Farrell. Hazel, I won't pretend I understand your family's situation. It's not my place. But I want to be clear. My confidence is with you, not them. Let's speak properly this week about where we go from here. You have my full support. I read it twice. Then I closed my laptop, made a cup of tea, and watched the morning light fill my kitchen. They would be all right. But they would have to manage it themselves. The next several days brought reality to them incrementally, as it tends to when you've spent years insulated from consequences. Joffrey rang with updates over the following week. The freeze-ups on the trust had stopped all automatic payments. The mortgage on the Harrogate house had bounced. The lender rang Mum directly, confused. She told him it was a bank error. He'd given her 30 days to resolve it. Jeffrey said quietly, Poppy's credit card had been declined at the beauty salon where she'd tried to book a recovery appointment the morning after the party. Then at her usual lunch spot in the Shambles. Then at the petrol station. Her car lease payment came back unpaid. The dealership had sent a notice. They're beginning to understand, Jeffrey said, that everything they have moves through your authorization. I felt no particular satisfaction at this. Only a strange, hollow steadiness. What about the business contacts? The people who were at the party? Dominic Farrell rang me this morning. He wants to strengthen the partnership agreement. He said, and this is a quote, that he's more confident in the company, now that he knows who's actually steering it. Almost laughed. Almost the Whitmore Group sent flowers to my office. A note accompanied them, brief and slightly awkward in the way that genuine apologies often are. We're sorry for believing things we should have questioned. They followed it with a request for a meeting and a proposal to expand their portfolio involvement with Brennan & Co. My mother had spent 11 years telling people I was nothing. In a single evening, the truth had unraveled every word of it. Joffrey, I said, I don't want to destroy them. I never wanted that. I just want to stop being used. I know. His voice was kind. Your father knew that too. That's precisely why he set things up the way he did. You have the power to protect yourself without causing harm. Then let's find something sustainable. Something fair. I'll draw up the options. I thanked him and rang off. Fair. That was all I'd ever wanted. It had never seemed like too much to ask. Mum came to my office 4 days after the party. My PA rang through with barely concealed alarm. Miss Brennan, there's a woman in reception who says she's your mother. She's quite upset. I closed my laptop. Tell her I'll be down. I took the lift to the ground floor. Mum was at the reception desk in a creased silk blouse I'd never seen wrinkled before. Her mascara smudged, her hair not quite as arranged as it usually was. She was speaking at the receptionist rather than to her. I need to see my daughter, right now. I need to see her now. The receptionist looked visibly relieved to see me. It's all right, Chloe. I've got it. Mum spun round. For just a moment, something in her face cracked open. Something that looked almost like hope. Hazel, thank God. We need to talk. This has all been a terrible. Not here. I kept my voice low and professional. This is my workplace. Then come home. Come back to the house. We're family. You told me not to make contact. My voice was level. You were very clear. I didn't mean it. Her voice rose. You know I didn't mean it. We were under so much stress. Jessica was. Poppy was pressuring me. Poppy pressured you to forget my birthday? I asked quietly. Poppy pressured you to throw her a party on my birthday and tell your guests that I file paperwork? Mum's mouth worked silently. Heads had turned across the lobby. If you'd like to talk, I said, you're welcome to make an appointment through my PA, like anyone else would. I'm your mother. I looked at her then. Really looked. The desperation in her eyes. The fear. 11 years ago, I would have rushed to comfort her. Would have apologized for causing trouble, found a way to absorb her distress, smoothed everything over until the threat of tension passed. I would have fixed it so she could stop feeling bad. I know you are, I said, but I'm also a person. And people deserve basic respect. I turned and walked back to the lift. She didn't follow. Poppy's unraveling was faster and, from a distance, more total. I heard about most of it through mutual acquaintances. A former university friend who still knew both of us, an industry contact who'd been at the party and witnessed everything. Poppy's personal number was still blocked, but her LinkedIn messages arrived in that other folder platforms use for people you're not connected to. The holiday to Portugal she'd had booked was canceled. Her card declined at the travel agent. Her friends, the ones who'd known her as the glamorous younger Brennan, the one with the credit card and the Range Rover lifestyle, started asking questions. Hang on, your sister is the actual finance director? But you said she just did admin. A boyfriend, a personal trainer called Zach, who had never held the same position for longer than 7 months and had been living rather comfortably in Poppy's orbit, packed his bags when he realized the arrangement had changed. I thought there was family money, he said, on his way out the door. This isn't what I thought it was. Poppy's LinkedIn message arrived 10 days after the party. It was longer than I expected and shorter on insight than I'd hoped. Hazel, I know we've never been that close, but I'm really struggling at the moment. I didn't understand how everything was structured. I didn't realize how important you were to the company. I'm sorry for everything. I just really need some help right now. I read it 3 times. I didn't understand how important you were. Not I'm sorry for treating you like you didn't matter. Not I'm sorry for liking that message on your birthday. Not I'm sorry for those messages in the private chat, for the low-all, for the she wouldn't understand strategy anyway. She wasn't sorry for 11 years of dismissal. She was sorry because the money had stopped. She still didn't understand what had actually happened. I typed a reply, deleted it, started again, deleted that too. Eventually, I wrote, I appreciate you getting in touch. When you're ready to talk about us, about our relationship, not about finances, let me know. I didn't hear back. The truth of it was harder to sit with than I expected. My sister didn't miss me. She missed what I provided. And somehow, even after everything, that hurt in a way the rest of it hadn't quite managed to. 2 weeks after my birthday, I wrote them a letter. Jeffrey delivered it personally to the Harrogate house. Email felt too easy to misread, too easy to dismiss. Dear Mum and Poppy, I'm not cutting you off. But I'm not continuing a relationship that functions only when I give and you take. If you want to be part of my life, I am genuinely open to that. But it has to be built on mutual respect, not on what I can provide. Effective immediately, the family trust will be restructured. You will each receive a fixed monthly amount. Mum, two 200-pound Poppy, one 100 pounds. This is enough to live on with care and thoughtfulness, if not lavishly. The amount is not conditional on the state of our relationship. You'll receive it whether we speak or not. But it is also not negotiable. It reflects what the trust can sustain without eroding the principle. If you want more than this, you'll need to earn it. Poppy, you're 32. It's time to build something of your own, Mum. The Harrogate house lease will not be renewed at the end of this quarter. The monthly amount covers a modest but comfortable flat. I'll ask Jeffrey to help with the transition if you'd like that support. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. I've spent 11 years giving everything I had to a family that treated me as though I weren't quite there. That's finished now. I love you both. But love doesn't mean accepting that your value exists only in what you can provide. And it doesn't mean quietly funding people who see you purely in terms of what you can transfer into their account. If you want to talk, really talk about us, about what we might become to each other, my door is open. But I won't be reaching out first. You asked for space. I'm giving it to you. The next move is yours. Hazel, Joffrey told me. Mum wept when she read it. Poppy threw hers across the room. Neither of them rang, but the money went out on the 1st of every month. All the same. That felt right. It's been 4 months now since my 37th birthday. Mum has moved into a 2-bedroom flat in the stray end of Harrogate. Smaller than she's used to, tidier than she lets on, and entirely manageable on what the trust now provides. She's learnt to cook properly for the first time in decades, apparently. Or she's learning, at least. Poppy has a job. Entry level at a PR firm in Leeds. I heard from our mutual friend that she complains about the commute and the hours and the expectation that she stay until the work is done. But she goes in every day, she shows up. That's not nothing. We haven't spoken. Not properly. There have been a few text messages, brief, careful, stilted, the kind of messages you send when you don't quite know what you're building toward. A birthday card arrived from Mum in April. She got the dates slightly wrong. She wrote the 24th instead of the 23rd, close but not quite. But she tried. She signed it with love and left space beneath it like she wanted to write more, and couldn't quite get there. I don't know if we'll ever have a real relationship. The kind where they ring just to hear my voice. The kind where my birthday is marked in someone's calendar. Because they care, not because the transfer is due. I've made peace with not knowing. I spent 37 years believing that if I gave enough, worked hard enough, stayed useful enough, made myself small enough not to be inconvenient, my family would eventually see me. Would love me the way I'd needed to be loved. Dad knew better. He wrote it down on yellow paper and waited 11 years for me to be ready to read it. Some people will never see you, no matter what you give them. And staying in that darkness, funding it, sustaining it, signing the checks that keep it comfortable, that doesn't bring the light back. It only drains yours. Walking away wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was permission. Permission to stop making myself smaller. Permission to stop apologizing for having needs of my own. Permission to finally, at 37 years old, put my own oxygen mask on before attending to everyone else's. Last week, I celebrated with a slice of Victoria sponge from the little bakery on my street and a glass of decent burgundy on my balcony. The evening air had that particular Leeds quality, slightly damp, never quite warm, but with something honest about it. Nobody rang, nobody sent anything, but I wasn't sad. Because for the first time in my adult life, I knew that my worth had never been located in who remembered me. It was located in how I remembered myself. And I was finally someone worth remembering. Love is not being needed. Love is being valued. I learned the difference the difficult way, over a long time and at considerable cost. But I learned, if this story moved you in some way, I'd really like to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between your peace and your family? What did you do? Leave a comment below. I read every single one, and this community means a great deal to me. And if you want more stories like this one, I've left a few in the description that I think will stay with you. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. That means more than you know. I'll see you in the next one. This is Serene Drama Stories, and we'll be here when you need us. People ask me sometimes, friends, colleagues, the occasional stranger who somehow senses that I've been through something. How I managed to keep going all those years. How I kept showing up to a company that was slowly saving itself on my labor, kept transferring money to people who never thought to ask how I was, kept signing my name at the bottom of the checks that funded a life I wasn't invited into. The honest answer is that I didn't know any other way to be. When your value has been defined for you since childhood, when the role you play in a family is decided before you're old enough to question it, you don't experience the role as a cage. You experience it as simply who you are, the fixer, the reliable one, the daughter who can be counted on precisely because she has never learned to count on anyone herself. I think about the years I didn't take holidays. I mean that in the most literal sense. I have used perhaps 12 days of annual leave in 11 years. There were always reasons. A deal closing, a financial quarter that needed watching, a payment mom needed moving, an invoice Poppy needed covering because her account was somehow, inexplicably, always running short. I became very skilled at finding reasons why my presence somewhere else would be irresponsible. What I was actually doing, if I'm honest with myself now, was ensuring that I remained indispensable. Because some part of me understood, even then, even before Dad's letter, even before the private group chat and the birthday party, that indispensable was the only category of value available to me in this family. Not beloved, not missed. Indispensable. That is a terrible thing to realize. It arrives slowly, like the cold in a poorly insulated flat. You don't notice the temperature dropping until you're already numb. I want to tell you about the Christmas 2 years before my birthday, because I think about it now and I understand it differently than I did then. It was the year the Riverside development deal was at its most precarious. Planning permission stalled, our lead investor threatening to pull out, and I was spending 16-hour days on phone calls trying to hold the whole structure together. Mom had asked back in October whether I'd be coming up to Harrogate for Christmas. I said I'd try. That was my mistake. I said I'd try rather than saying yes, which, in the architecture of Mom's expectations, translated into a kind of insult. Christmas morning, I drove up. 2.5 hours in holiday traffic with a boot full of presents. Things I'd researched and ordered and wrapped carefully, because I had always done things carefully, including the things nobody noticed. Mom's cashmere dressing gown, Poppy's expensive perfume, a case of wine for both of them. I had made a reservation for the 3 of us at a restaurant in Harrogate that I knew Mom had been wanting to try, somewhere with a proper Christmas menu, candles, the full production. When I arrived, the house was already full. Poppy had invited 4 of her friends to stay. They were sprawled across every surface, empty Prosecco bottles on the worktops, someone's mascara on the bathroom mirror. Mum was in her element, hosting, laughing, replenishing glasses. She hugged me briefly when I came through the door and immediately turned back to Poppy's friend, who was telling some story about a party in Ibiza. My presents were opened among the chaos without anyone really looking at them. Mum said, "Oh, lovely," and moved on. Poppy said, "Cheers," genuinely cheers, like I'd handed her around in a pub. The restaurant reservation sat unused on my phone. Nobody had asked about it. Nobody had thought to wonder whether I'd made a plan. Poppy's friends stayed through Boxing Day. I drove back to Leeds on the 26th in the same traffic I'd arrived in. I didn't cry on the drive back. I turned the radio on and kept it loud and concentrated on the road and told myself that families were complicated and Christmas was always a bit much and everything would be fine. Everything was fine because I never allowed myself to measure the distance between what I had and what other people seemed to take for granted. I had built walls that were so useful for managing other people's emergencies that I had stopped noticing they were keeping me in, Dad used to say, and I can hear it now in his voice, that Leeds vowels he never quite lost, even after the company grew and the world got bigger. He used to say, "The strongest walls in the world don't keep anything out if you built them from the inside." He was talking about business risk management at the time. He was talking about building structures that looked solid but trapped you. I understood it as a business concept. I understand it now as a description of my own life. He was always doing that. Saying something that sounded like it was about the company and actually being about everything else. I found myself thinking about him a great deal in the days after the party. Not the abstracted memory of him, the general shape of a father who was kind and reliable, but the specific particular man. The way he made tea in the wrong order, milk first, which drove Mum to genuine distraction. The stack of paperback thrillers he kept by the armchair in his office. Always 6 months behind whatever was popular, reading them with enormous satisfaction. The phone call he made to me every Sunday evening at 7:30, without fail, just to check in. Not to ask for anything, not to report anything, just to hear how I was. After he died, the Sunday calls stopped, obviously. But for the first 6 months, my phone would ring at 7:30 on a Sunday, and my heart would lift before I could stop it. Just for that fraction of a second before reality reasserted itself. It never quite goes away, that reflex. You just learn to be faster than it. I think the thing I've had to accept is that Mum was never quite the person I believed her to be. Or rather, she was always exactly the person she was, and I constructed a version of her that was more forgiving, more capable of seeing me, than the real one. Children do this. It's not stupidity. It's survival. You cannot afford, as a child, to fully know the person responsible for keeping you safe. So you fill in the gaps with something more bearable. I filled in the gaps for 37 years. The letter dismantled a lot of that very efficiently. Because Dad, who had loved her, who had chosen her, who had built a life and a family with her, had seen clearly what I couldn't quite let myself see. He had watched Mum look past me for decades and understood that she would keep doing it. He had not been angry about it, not from what I could read in his letter. He had been sad and practical, and quietly determined to make sure I had everything I needed to be all right without her. That is a particular kind of love, the kind that plans for absence, the kind that says, "I cannot fix this for you while I'm here, but I can make sure you have what you need when I'm not." I think I needed 11 years to be ready for it. After the freeze, after Jeffrey's audit, after the letters and the voicemails and the declined credit cards, there came a strange, extended stillness. Not silence, exactly, but something less chaotic than the weeks immediately after the party. The initial panic from Mum and Poppy had worn itself out. The voicemails had stopped arriving in the small hours. Life on both sides had settled into a new shape. I found myself eating breakfast properly for the first time in years. I don't mean I hadn't been eating. I'd been eating, in the functional way of someone who understands that the body needs fuel. I mean sitting down in the morning light with actual food on an actual plate, without my laptop open and a conference call on mute in the background. It sounds like a small thing. It wasn't, particularly. But the accumulation of small things is where actual life happens, and I had been missing most of them for a very long time. I started going for walks in the evenings along the canal. Bought a new plant for the kitchen, a large, slightly unruly monstera that took up far more space than was sensible and immediately made the flat feel inhabited in a way it hadn't before. Rebooked annual leave I'd canceled twice and actually took it this time. A week in Pembrokeshire, rain and coastal paths, and a pub with proper crab sandwiches, and I read 3 novels and walked until my legs ached and came back feeling approximately human. My work didn't suffer. If anything, it clarified. When you stop spending 20% of your cognitive energy managing the anxiety of other people's demands, you find out there's rather more of you left over. Dominic Farrell and I had that conversation he'd mentioned. We met in a restaurant in Leeds city centre, a Wednesday lunchtime, And he was straightforward with me in a way I found I appreciated enormously. He said he'd felt for some time that something hadn't quite added up about Brennan & Co.'s management structure. That Mum had always described things in terms that didn't quite square with what the company actually produced. He said he was glad to have clarity now. He said, and this is the part that stayed with me, that he'd always respected my work enormously, and had wondered why I was never in the room when it came to discussing the relationship at a strategic level. Because I wasn't invited to those conversations, I said. I was there for the contracts. He looked at me for a moment. That's going to change, he said. It did. The Whitmore Group meeting happened 3 weeks later. It was longer and more substantive than anything we'd managed in the previous 4 years, and 2 of the things they proposed were ideas I'd had in 2021 and been told by Mum were too ambitious. We began a formal development partnership. It moved quickly once there was nothing in the way of it. I won't claim that all of this vindication made up for 11 years of invisibility. It didn't. The professional recognition was real and welcome, and I was glad of it, but it wasn't the thing I'd actually been missing. What I'd been missing was simpler and harder to replace than any business partnership. I'd been missing the feeling of mattering to someone for no reason other than that I existed. The birthday cake Dad made when I was 13. The Sunday calls at 7:30. The look across the dinner table that meant, I see you. I know who you are. I don't know if I'll get that from Mum. I genuinely don't know. I think she loves me in the way that people love things they've never fully paid attention to. Generally, abstractly, without really knowing the specific shape of what they love. I think Poppy is capable of more than she's currently living up to, though whether she'll choose to grow into it remains her decision. The allowance goes out on the 1st of the month. The mortgage lease on the Harrogate house transferred to Mum's name for the final quarter at a reduced rate while she arranged the move. Jeffrey handled the logistics. The Harrogate flat she's in now is smaller and quieter, and she keeps it, I'm told, rather more carefully than she kept the big house. Something about having less space tends to focus a person. Poppy has been at the PR firm for 4 months. I know this because our mutual friend provides occasional, careful updates, always phrased so that I can choose to engage or not. She's finding it hard. That doesn't surprise me. Finding work hard when you haven't practiced it for a decade is entirely understandable, and I don't hold it against her. I hold against her the 10 years before the difficulty. But I try to hold it lightly, because carrying that weight only burdens the person who carries it. I try. Some days I manage it better than others. The birthday card Mum sent in April. The one with the wrong date, the 24th instead of the 23rd, I kept. I put it in the desk drawer next to Dad's letter. I don't know exactly why. Maybe because even an imperfect attempt at remembering is still a different thing from not trying. Maybe because I want eventually to be the kind of person who can hold room for imperfect. Maybe I'm not there yet, but I can see it from here. There's a particular moment I return to when things feel heavy, when I'm running through the old calculations, the ones that whisper, was any of it worth it? Should you have handled it differently? Are you certain you did the right thing? It's the moment in Dad's kitchen in the summer I was 17. He was going over a set of accounts. Messy, handwritten. This was before we had proper systems, and I was helping him cross-reference figures because I was the only one who'd sit still long enough. It was late. Mum was in bed. Poppy was at a friend's house. The kitchen was warm and quiet. He looked up from the paperwork and said, completely out of nowhere, "You know what I think you'll be, Hazel?" I was 17. I said something like, "What?" He said, "Someone who figures it out. Whatever it is, whatever gets thrown at you, you'll figure it out." And then he went back to the accounts. That was it. That was the whole thing. And I have thought about it more times than I can count across the years since. I'm 37 years old, and I think I might finally be figuring it out. It took a private group chat, a birthday party with the wrong name on the cake, a letter in a desk drawer, and one very calm evening standing in a room while the truth unraveled itself in front of everyone who needed to hear it. It took 99 missed calls and 43 voicemails, and the steadiest I've ever felt in my life on the morning I woke up to all of them. It took all of that. But I got there. You get to decide what you're worth. Not your family, not your history, not the version of you that was formed by people who needed you to be manageable. You. And the decision is renewable. You can make it again tomorrow, and the day after, and on all the days when old habits press against the new ones, and try to convince you that smallness is the safer option. Smallness was never safe. It just felt familiar. The monstera in my kitchen has put out 2 new leaves since I bought it. Enormous, glossy, slightly absurd. It takes up exactly as much space as it needs. I think I know the feeling. If this resonated with you at all, if any part of this story felt like something you've been carrying, I want you to know that you are not alone in it. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and what part of this landed for you. This community is genuinely one of the things I'm most grateful for, and your responses matter more than you might imagine. There's more to come. Thank you for being here. This is Serene Drama Stories, and we'll see you in the next one.